flying ahead of them. A shot of caffeine wouldn't go amiss. The first officer dutifully headed back to the galley and closed the cockpit door behind him. Normally, the cabin crew would bring the coffee, but Farik was not about to question the man who held his career in his hands. Now, sitting alone in the warm cocoon of the cockpit, was a man who had been rehearsing for this night for over a month. Every step, every movement had been planned with the utmost precision, and it had to be, because Zaharie was trying to pull off the impossible. He would now try to make one of the world's largest, most modern jets vanish from the face of the Earth. Safely locked behind his bulletproof cockpit door, ironically designed to keep would-be hijackers out, he could now carry out this plan without interruption. He reached back into his flight bag behind his seat, pulled out a warm sweater and put it on. He would be needing it in a moment. Zaharie had chosen this exact moment to make the plane disappear because for these precious few minutes, nobody on the ground was expecting to hear from the aircraft. Malaysian controllers had handed him off to Vietnam, and Vietnamese controllers were busy with the aircraft which were already in their airspace. As far as they were concerned, it would be a few minutes before Flight 370 checked in. So, for these precious few moments, Flight 370 was in limbo. Nobody in the world was watching. Zaharie's first step in making the plane vanish was to make it disappear from radar. To do this, he needed to turn off the plane's transponder. But he wasn't going to do this straight away. If he did it before he reached Agarie, Malaysian Air Traffic Control might notice him dropping off their radar screens. If he waited until he had reached the waypoint, he would truly be out of their jurisdiction. As the first officer obliviously fixed a coffee in the forward galley, or whatever counted for coffee on an aircraft, Zaharie fixed his eyes on Agarie, as it inched ever closer at 8 miles per minute. When the active waypoint at the top right of this screen here changed from Agarie to Bitad, the next waypoint en route, that would be his trigger to turn off the transponder. And after a few moments, it came. The aircraft reached Agarie and began turning towards its next waypoint. At exactly that moment, Zaharie switched off the transponder. Flight 370 disappeared from air traffic control screens in Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand and Cambodia. Step 1 was complete. But unbeknownst to Zaharie, he had left a clue. The first of a few clues he would leave over the coming hours, and a clue that ultimately took investigators years to uncover. The transponder of the Boeing 777 has basically 3 settings. Fully off, where no information is transmitted to air traffic control, altitude off, where only the plane's position, but not its altitude, is transmitted to air traffic control, and fully on, where its position, altitude, and a few other parameters are transmitted. For a split second, as Zaharie twisted the dial towards the fully off position, it passed through the alt-off position. Unbeknownst to him, for that telling split second as the dial passed through alt-off, stations on the ground received the plane's position while its altitude read 0. This is not what would happen if the plane had experienced a massive electrical failure, leading to the loss of the transponder, among other systems. If that had happened, all of the data would have been lost at once. This brief partial loss of transponder data suggests that somebody in the cockpit was turning this dial manually to the off position. But this clue wouldn't be discovered for a long time. As far as Zaharie was concerned, step 1 of his plan had been completed successfully. From that moment, nobody on the ground knew where Flight 370 was. The plane continued turning towards Bitad, the next waypoint on its route. Except there was still a problem. By disabling the transponder, Zaharie had made the plane invisible to air traffic controllers, but Malaysia Airlines still knew that the plane was in the air. That's because the 777 is equipped with ACARS, or Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System. This feeds status reports from the plane to the airline via a satellite communication system called SATCOM. These status reports include information about the plane's fuel on board, its maintenance status, and even its position along its flight route every 30 minutes. Zaharie knew that he couldn't truly disappear as long as ACARS was still functioning, so he needed to disable it. But disabling ACARS was not going to be as easy as turning off the transponder. If he turned ACARS off the usual way, it would send a message to the ground saying that it was being powered down. Not a great prospect if your mission is to disappear without a trace. To truly vanish without leaving a trace, the captain would need to do something far more drastic. he would need to essentially pull the plug right out of the socket so that ACARS would go dark immediately, without sending this telltale log-off message. To do this, Zaharie reached up to the overhead panel and, using 2 fingers, turned off both engines' electrical generators. This instantly cut off the electrical supply to a whole host of aircraft systems, including the SATCOM, the satellite communication system which ACARS uses to send and receive its messages. Now, there was no way for anyone on the ground to receive information from the plane. Just to be sure, he then went through the menu on his flight management computer and deselected the 2 ways by which ACARS can communicate with the ground: SATCOM and VHF radio. Now, even if SATCOM came back on, ACARS wouldn't be able to talk to the ground. As far as the outside world was concerned, it was at this spot over the South China Sea where MH370 had vanished.